There is one prayer they told us never to say. Not because it was blasphemy. Not because it was dangerous to us. Because it was dangerous to them. My name is Marcus. I am 34 years old. I work as an exit counselor, helping people leave cults and occult groups. Before that, I organized the rituals I'm about to describe. I spent 11 years inside a satanic circle. I rose from a frightened 17-year-old looking for somewhere to belong to a ritual organizer who ran sessions, trained initiates, and understood, in real operational terms, which weapons the other side was using against us. By the time I left, I had watched our elder cancel rituals mid-session, his face going still and controlled the way it only went when he was afraid, because of a prayer drifting through a neighbor's wall. I had seen grown men walk out of buildings because someone, somewhere nearby, was praying that prayer. I'm going to tell you what that prayer is. But first, you need to understand how I know. Because if I just hand you the name right now, you'll treat it like a curiosity. What I want you to understand is what it costs someone to say it, and what it does to everything that doesn't want it said. I am telling you this from the other side of something I am not sure I fully survived. And I am telling you because the occult world counts on your not knowing this. They are counting on your silence. I am done being silent. It started the year my mother died. I was 17, and the ground dropped out from under everything. She was the architecture of my world, the reason the days made sense, the voice that told me where I stood. When she was gone, I was standing in a field with no edges. Grief doesn't announce itself as grief at first. It announces itself as hunger. I was hungry for anything that could make sense of it. A classmate, I'll call him Pete, came to me about 3 months after the funeral. He didn't approach it as anything unusual. He talked about a study group, a philosophical circle. People who were asking real questions, he said, instead of swallowing easy answers. There was a man running it who was unlike any teacher he had ever met. He quoted scripture, not to manipulate, Pete said, but to expose what was hidden in it. People who went said they finally understood things they had been trained not to see. I went. I was 17, motherless, and I had nowhere else to put the weight of what I was carrying. The meeting was in an apartment, warm, ordinary. There were maybe 12 people there, and at the front of the room was the man who would define the next 11 years of my life. He never gave us his name the way normal people give names. We called him the Elder. He was in his 60s, tall, with the kind of composed authority that doesn't require volume. He spoke quietly, and you leaned forward to catch it. He quoted Paul, then Gnostic texts, then something I couldn't identify, weaving them together as if they were parts of a single truth that conventional religion had been deliberately hiding. He saw me across the room that first night and said simply that grief was not weakness. It was proof that you had loved something real. That the pain I was in was a doorway, not a dead end. I was 17. I had never been seen like that by anyone except my mother. I came back the next week, and the week after that. The Elder ran what he called a circle, a structured community with ranks, responsibilities, and a shared understanding of spiritual reality that conventional religion, he said, had been engineered to suppress. It wasn't theatrical in the way movies depict. There were no dramatic ceremonies in the first weeks, no robes, no altars. There was study, discussion, philosophical community, and there was belonging. The raw, uncomplicated sense that these people were your people, that you mattered to them in a way the outside world had never offered. Conversion into something dark is not usually dramatic. It is gradual, and it is warm. By the time I understood what I had joined, I had been there long enough that leaving felt like cutting off a limb. Over the next several years, I rose within the structure. I was methodical, dependable, and I had a certain analytical mind that the Elder valued. I helped design ritual sessions, coordinated initiates, managed the administrative architecture of what we did. And through that role, I learned something that most members never learned. I learned what we were afraid of. Not theoretically afraid, operationally afraid. There were specific things, specific prayers, specific practices that the Elder monitored like a general monitoring enemy positions. He had developed countermeasures. There were protocols for when certain prayers were prayed near the location of a session. There were procedures for what to do if someone in the group had been prayed over by a specific type of believer. And above all of them, there was one prayer that stood apart. What I am about to tell you is the thing he spent 11 years making sure we never understood. The elder spoke about it rarely, and always with a kind of controlled urgency that I came to recognize as fear. The elder's version of it, which looked like calm and sounded like warning. Do not let that prayer be said over you, he told us. If you sense it starting, leave the room. If it has already begun, we have protocols. I was an organizer. I knew the protocols. And I was beginning, in the back of my mind, to ask why we needed them. The crack appeared in the 4th year, though I didn't understand what it was at the time. There was a young man, I will not use his real name, who had joined the circle at 15. I had been one of the people responsible for his initiation, which meant I had been responsible for drawing him deeper. By the time he was 17, he was trying to leave. What I watched the elder do to him did not involve physical violence. It was something worse. Psychological architecture, built over months, isolation from his family, redefinition of his identity until he didn't know who he was outside the group, then the quiet surgical implication that if he left, everything he believed about himself would collapse. The elder did it with the patience of a craftsman. He did it with warmth. I sat in those meetings and I watched that boy's face. There is a particular look, I know it now. I have seen it in every person I have counseled in the years since. When someone realizes that the thing they love most is also the thing that is destroying them. His eyes went somewhere inward. His hands, which had been animated and open, became very still. He stopped laughing at things that used to make him laugh. And I knew what I was watching. I knew it in my chest before I could say it with words. Because that interior stillness, that quiet disappearing, was what I had felt happening to me 4 years earlier. I had simply been too grateful to name it. I tried to leave that year. I told the elder quietly, privately, that I needed distance. His response was measured and almost gentle. He told me what I had become to the circle, what my departure would mean to the people who depended on me. He said there were consequences to leaving that he would not be able to control, not from him, but from forces that did not observe the boundaries he did. He told me this without a single threat in his voice, and I understood completely that I was being told I could not leave. I stayed, but something in me had shifted. Something in me was watching. I spent those 18 months watching. 18 months later, I left at 2 in the morning. I had planned it over the previous 6 weeks. New phone, new apartment lined up in a different part of the city. I moved in the middle of the night with what I could carry in 2 bags. The paranoia of those first hours was unlike anything I can describe. The sensation that every headlight behind me was someone from the circle, that every phone notification was a message I didn't want to receive. I walked for blocks when I could have taken a cab, because I didn't want anyone to know the route. I ended up in front of a small Catholic church on the east side of the city. It was 3 in the morning. I had no relationship with this place, no history with it, no faith. I stopped in front of it because it was lit, and because something I could not have named at the time told me this was somewhere they would not follow. The door was unlocked. I went inside. There was a priest in the back, stacking hymnals for the next morning's service. He was 60, maybe 62, with the kind of unhurried steadiness that suggests someone has seen enough of life to stop being surprised by most of it. He looked at me without alarm, a disheveled stranger at 3 in the morning, and said hello, as if this were a reasonable hour for company. His name was Father Daniel. He offered me a folding chair and disappeared into a back room, returning with 2 cups of coffee. We sat in the near dark of that old church, and he asked me nothing about where I had come from. He did not ask what I had been doing. He simply sat with me, and when the coffee was finished, he asked if I wanted him to pray with me. I said yes. I'm not sure why. I think I was exhausted enough that no was no longer a word I had access to. He did not ask what I needed prayer for. He did not ask me to confess anything or believe anything or agree to anything. He simply placed one hand gently on my shoulder and began to pray. And I want to be precise about what happened next, because this is the part people most want me to exaggerate, and I am going to refuse to do that. What I felt was heat. Not metaphorical heat. Heat in my chest and in my arms, spreading outward from where his hand rested on my shoulder. And beneath that, or alongside it, a pressure. The sensation of something being gripped. Not painfully, but with a firmness that I can only describe as intention. As if something that had taken up residence in me was being addressed directly, not by the priest, but through the prayer. I want to be clear. This was not pleasant. I did not experience it as peace. I experienced it as resistance, as if whatever was in me did not want this to continue. There was a pulling sensation, the way a wound pulls when something foreign is being removed. My hands trembled. I pressed them flat on my knees. Father Daniel did not stop. And then something changed. I cannot tell you the exact moment. There was no dramatic shift, no light, no voice. But gradually the resistance faded, and in the space where it had been, something else arrived. I would not have called it peace that night. I wouldn't have trusted peace. It felt more like gravity, like being set back down on solid ground after a very long time of falling. I wept. I had not wept since my mother's funeral. I put my face in my hands in that small, worn church, and I wept until I didn't have anything left, while a 60-year-old priest I had met 40 minutes ago kept his hand on my shoulder and kept praying. When it was over, he said nothing profound. He asked me if I was hungry. I did not understand what had happened to me. I only knew that something had, and that I did not yet have words for it. In the months that followed, as Father Daniel and I began meeting regularly, I started to understand what had happened to me on that first night. Not spiritually, but forensically. Because I was an organizer. I had been inside the architecture. And I began to map what I knew from inside the circle onto what I had experienced in that church. I kept returning to a specific memory, a specific room. We were mid-session. I remember the particular quality of the air in that apartment. The way the candles made everything seem slightly underwater. When the elder stopped speaking, he did not startle. He did not look at anyone. He simply went still in the way a compass needle goes still when it finds north, except this was the opposite of finding. This was losing something. He said quietly that something had shifted. His jaw was set. His composure was intact, but his eyes were doing something I had only seen a few times, and I knew enough to recognize it. The elder was managing a reaction. He ended the session early. He left before most of us. That happened dozens of times over 11 years. And always, when we later learned the cause, it was the same. A neighbor had been praying. A family in the apartment above had been holding a prayer service. And always, when the elder reported it with that particular controlled irritation, the same description. Someone was praying the rosary. The Marian Rosary. 15 decades of prayer, offered to the Mother of God, asking for her intercession through the mysteries of Christ's life. This was what made the elder leave rooms. This was what interrupted sessions. This was what the protocols were designed to address. Not general Christian prayer. Not scripture reading. The rosary, specifically, deliberately, repeatedly. I had been in the group long enough to see the pattern a dozen times and never connect the dots. It was only from the outside, from the vantage point of what had happened to me in that church, that the pattern became legible. And then I remembered something else. The night Father Daniel prayed over me. I had not been watching carefully enough in my own distress to notice at first. But as he continued that night, he had shifted into the Hail Mary. The prayer to Mary, asking for her intercession. He had cycled through it more than once. He had been praying the rosary. That was what my body had been responding to. That was what the resistance in me had fought against. That was the prayer the elder had spent 11 years keeping out of our sessions. What I am going to tell you now is not theology. It is operational intelligence. The understanding of a weapon, described from the inside of the institution that feared it most. I want to tell you exactly what the rosary is, as I now understand it from both sides of the experience. It is not magic. I cannot say that clearly enough. What I witnessed, what I felt, what the elder feared, none of it was about the words as a formula. The circle understood this. The elder understood this. He did not fear people who recited the rosary mechanically, the way some people mouth prayers they don't believe. He feared people who prayed it with authority. The rosary is a prayer offered to Mary, asking her, as a mother, as the one who was closest to Christ, to intercede. It moves through the mysteries of Christ's life, the incarnation, the crucifixion, the resurrection. When someone prays it who has a real relationship with Christ, who means what they are saying, who is praying it with intention and authority, that is what breaks something. That is what I felt broken in me that night in the church. The elder once said something to a small group of us that I never forgot. The enemy does not fear prayers that come from obligation. He fears prayers that come from love. And above all, he fears the ones who go through the mother to reach the son. Because there is no argument against that. I did not understand what he was telling us at the time. He was telling us what defeated him. I have been working as an exit counselor for 6 years now. I have sat with people who have come out of groups like the one I was in, and from groups far worse. And there is something I watch people do when they learn about the rosary that I have to address directly, because I have watched it happen enough times that I know exactly where the hope turns into frustration. They learn that this prayer has power, and so they begin reciting it the way someone might recite a combination they have been given for a lock. Methodically, urgently, waiting for the click, the right words in the right order, expecting the automatic result, and then nothing happens. The room does not change, the dread does not lift, and they look at me with a very specific expression, the expression of someone who was told there was a door and cannot find it. I have watched the frustration. I understand it. But I am telling you what the elder told us, and what my own experience confirmed. The prayer is not the mechanism. The relationship is the mechanism. The prayer is the expression of the relationship. When Father Daniel prayed over me that night, he was not performing a ritual. He was speaking to someone he knew. He meant it. And the occult world does not fear words. It fears people who mean them. I know what it is to be on the side that fears this prayer. I know what it costs to say it and mean it, because for a long time I was not someone who could. I spent years becoming someone who could. I am still becoming that person. If you are watching this and the rosary is something you have never seriously considered, not as a Catholic thing, not as a religious exercise, but as a weapon in a real spiritual conflict, I want to tell you something the elder told us, and did not mean as encouragement. He said the prayer only works for people who have access to the authority behind it. He said this to reassure us. He said the people who pray it without relationship, without genuine faith, are harmless. He was right. He was also wrong. He was right that the prayer requires the relationship. He was wrong to think the relationship was out of your reach, because you can build that relationship. That is the whole point. You do not start with authority. You start with asking. You start with the conversation. You start by meaning it, even imperfectly, and letting that imperfect sincerity open into something stronger over time. That is what happened to me in that church. I did not come in with authority. I came in exhausted and empty and without anywhere else to go. Father Daniel prayed for me anyway, with the authority he had earned over 30 years of meaning it. And something transferred. Now you know what the prayer is. You know what it does. You know why the elder spent 11 years keeping it out of those rooms. That is what he never wanted you to hear. That is what I was done being silent about. I am telling you, start the prayer. Mean what you can mean. Ask for more than you know how to ask for. The occult world has operational protocols for the people who do this. They have protocols because those people are a threat. You can be one of them. And if this reached you for a reason, pass it to someone it was meant to reach.